Aloha, kakahiaka, and good morning. I would like to call the Planning and the Economy Committee meeting to order. I would like to welcome the following members who are present in the council chambers. Council Member Calvin Say, and pursuant to Council Rule 8D, Council Chair Tommy Waters is designated as a temporary voting member. Committee Member Wire is excused from today's meeting, and Council Member Cordero should be here shortly. Pursuant to Hawaii Revised Statute Section 92.3.7, this meeting will be conducted as a remote meeting by interactive conference technology with the following procedures in effect for the meeting. Members of the public will be allowed to provide oral testimony remotely or in person in the council chamber on all items on the agenda when each item is taken up. All persons who register to testify in person will be called upon first, followed by those who register to testify remotely. Persons who have not registered will be given an opportunity to speak following the registered testifiers. Before testifying, each person shall state their name and will be limited to a 1-minute presentation on each item. HRS Section 92-3.7 requires all votes at a remote meeting to be conducted by a roll call unless unanimous. I will first call for objections, and if there are any, I will call for a roll call vote. For those council members participating from outside of the council chamber, under HRS Section 92.3.7, the meeting will automatically recess if we lose audio-visual contact with you and cannot reconvene until we reestablish contact. Therefore, please announce beforehand if you will be voluntarily signing out of the meeting. Written testimonies, including the testifier's address, email address, and phone number, will be available to the public as described on the posted agenda. As a courtesy, please turn off all cell phones. Moving to agenda item number 1 for extension of time only. Bill 10, 2022 CD1 addresses the regulation of land uses through Chapter 21, revised ordinances of Honolulu 2021, the land use ordinance. Members, this bill is on the agenda today for an extension of time only. DPP has requested an extension of 250 more days to consider the bill. I think we will agree that this measure is complex, and I support ensuring we have sufficient time to understand the measure and how it would change the existing land use ordinance. I do intend to continue looking at amendments to the commercial use provisions at the next Planning and the Economy meeting on May 25th. Members, I would like to take testimony before we introduce the administration. Public testimony should relate to the extension of time only. We will now proceed with in-person testimony. Clerks, do we have any in-person testifiers?
Chair, there are none.
Is there anyone else in the council chamber who would like to testify? Please come forward to the testifier podium and state your name for the record. Seeing none, we will now proceed with remote testimony. Clerks, do we have any remote testifiers?
Chair, we have a remote testifier. We have Angela Young online.
Good morning, Angela. Please proceed. We can't hear you. Angela? And I just want to make sure that this is only for the extension of time on Bill 10. I can't hear you. You have to unmute.
She's unmuted on our end.
Regrettably, I believe there is a technical problem because you are unmuted on your end.
She's still unmuted on our end, Chair.
Oh, on our end, so it's her end.
It's her end.
I'm sorry, Angela, you are unmuted on our end, so it's on your end.
Oh, now.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So I was wondering, just the extension, not the details, like the policy itself, the land use ordinance.
Yes, narrowly, have your comments on the extension only.
Oh, okay. I don't have comments about the extension.
Okay, thank you so much. For the administration, we have Don Takeuchi Apuna, Director for the Department of Planning and Permitting.
Aloha Chair, members of the committee, Donna Puna, DPP. Yes, we appreciate the committee extending time for us to more closely look at the bill and some of the issues that are coming up through the bill. Thank you.
Members, any questions for Don? Thank you so much, and we look forward to working with the administration on the remaining timeline for the consideration of Bill 10. The chair notes that the time needed to consider Bill 10, 2022 CD1 will exceed the current deadline for council action. Therefore, the chair recommends that the bill be granted a 250-day extension of time pursuant to the request from the Department of Permitting and Planning in Departmental Communication 280-2023. Any discussion, objections, or reservations? Hearing none, so ordered. Moving to agenda item number 2. Resolution 23-45 confirms the mayor's appointees to serve on the Oahu Historic Preservation Commission of the City and County of Honolulu. I just wanted to reiterate my appreciation to the administration for their support to finally stand up the Oahu Historic Preservation Commission. I am particularly appreciative of the thoughtful selection of nominees. Also, mahalo again for those that put their names forward. This list includes a high caliber of professionals who have dedicated their careers to their crafts and come from different sectors of our communities. Members, we have posted to the agenda a proposed CD1 version of the resolution. For your information, a summary of the amendments is listed on the agenda. In short, the main proposed amendment would start the terms 30 days after the adoption of the resolution. Members, I would like to take testimony before we introduce the administration and the appointees. We will now proceed with in-person testimony. Clerks, do we have any in-person testifiers?
Chair, there are none.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the council chamber who would like to testify? Please come forward to the testifier podium and state your name for the record. Hearing none, we will now proceed with remote testimony. Clerks, do we have any remote testifiers?
Chair, there are none.
Thank you. Members, we are in discussion. We have for the administration, Don Takeuchi Apuna, Director, Department of Planning and Permitting. And we have all of the nominees, Nanea Lo, Mahealani Cipher, Halama Farden, Kai White, Richard Douglas Davis, Mehana Hine, Thomas Dye, Glenn Mason, Kehonani Abad. Some are in person and some will be presenting via Zoom. I would like the appointees to introduce yourselves and share in a sentence or two why you're interested in serving on the Oahu Historic Preservation Commission. Let's start with Nanea Lo, Mahealani Cipher, Halama Farden, Kai White, Richard Davis, Mehana Hine, Thomas Dye, Glenn Mason, Keholani Abad, in that order. And I believe Nanea Lo is online. Good morning, Nanea.
Good morning. Aloha mai kākou. Ova o Nanea Loko ino no Papakule Oahu Maio, no hoa ma mo Ili'ili. I'm Nanea Lo. I come from Papakule Oahu, currently residing in Mo Ili'ili, and I'm also abroad right now. I believe that I am an ideal candidate to assume this position on the Oahu Historic Preservation Commission, as I also serve on the Oahu Burial Council as the Kona representative. And I have a background in urban planning, and I am a starch community advocate and organizer. And I am familiar with, Hawaii and Oahu and how important these sites are. And I would love to be considered, and I'm considered, and work with you all. Mahalo.
Thank you so much. Members, do you have any questions for Nanea? Moving on to the next. I'm sorry, Councilmember Cordero, and by the way, I wanted to welcome Councilmember Cordero to the meeting today.
Thank you. Hi, Nanea. Thank you so much for taking the time to meet with me, and I just want to reflect that on all of the OHPC members or appointees. Thank you very much.
Moving on to the next nominee, Mahealani Cipher.
Thank you. Sorry. Aloha mai kako. My name is Mahealani Cipher, born and raised in the Ahupua'a of Kaneohe, Oahu. And why do I want to be a part of this Oahu Historic Preservation Commission? Started in 1990, in the early 1990s and closer to 1993 when the rejuvenation of Hawaiian identity came together at Iolani Palace, and it inspired many of us to reach back into our history and our ancestors to celebrate the famous places and the important historic, the important history of where we live. And one of the things we did with the council back then, when we first promoted this commission, was to share with the council the history and the stories of the places that they lived, every single one of the 9 council members. And they were surprised and excited to learn that where they lived, something important happened in ancient history. And so what we want to do is continue that here with this commission to make sure that these important places, as they are planned and developed, are recognizing the important things that took place on our island, in our homeland, so that we can celebrate history on and on. Mahalo.
Thank you so much. Hailama Farden.
Ai velina ke aloha kākou a pauloa o Hailama Farden ko uinoa. I like to say I'm born and raised in Waianae, but I was born in the hospital like most of us. I was raised by my paternal grandparents, exposing me. So I wanted to share with me personally and professionally. And anyway, personally, it's a passion for me to do research, to understand where I live. Our sense of place is our living address. It's where we are, what we cherish, what we do, the air we breathe. Being raised by my grandparents afforded me the opportunity to see things through a different lens than others of my generation. And I did move further to get a degree in Hawaiian Studies. I've worked for Kamehameha for 31 years and served as the Association of Hawaiian Civic Clubs overall president, as well as serving in capacities in the other Hawaiian Royal Societies. So professionally, I've done also consultation work, served as a consultant, and supported naming specific projects, buildings, areas, or actually rekindling and bringing back some of the old names of places that we've forgotten for whatever reason. And it's also a personal passion of myself to do this kind of research, and I love it. So that's my personal side, my professional side, and I'm open for any questions you may have.
Members, any questions?
Mahalo nui.
Thank you so much. Kai White.
Aloha, everyone. My name is Kai White. I was actually born and raised in California. My mother just liked the name Kai, and it all is very cosmic because I became a surfer in Hawaii at the age of 24 and never left. So I was educated in historic preservation at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. Came up through Bill Chapman's program, which was very much about the local architecture. And most recently, I wanted to share a story that I think might describe why I am here and why I want to serve on the committee. So the most recent position I had was a big corporation. I had an architectural historian that was my supervisor, was working from Portland, Maine, and he's been doing review in Hawaii since 2011. And there was a rock fall event at Waimea Valley, and I was being told by the planners in this corporation to write a letter to the state saying that the rockfall mitigation that was planned would have absolutely no potential of having any effects to the area in Waimea Valley. I told them I couldn't do that because it's probably the most sacred ahupua'a on the island of Oahu, and it's one of the last remaining intact ahupua'a on the island. And my supervisor said, well, isn't it just a bunch of rocks? So I think that pretty much sums up why I feel like I need to be here. I no longer work for that company. And if I can be a kind of, I guess I see myself as a kind of interloper or intermediary and help maybe interpret for people why Waimea Valley isn't just a bunch of rocks, then I'll do my parents proud and be able to stand up for the historic resources of Hawaii. Thank you.
Thank you for agreeing to serve. Members, any questions? Next, we have Richard Douglas Davis.
Aloha and thank you. I usually go by Richard D. Davis instead of the full Douglas, but I retired from working at the Army Garrison, Hawaii in 2021. And I have spent a career of about 30 years helping government agencies improve their capability of performing their preservation duties and incorporating it into their activities while pursuing their other main missions. From working with the Department of Parks and Recreation, Government of Guam, to becoming the Guam Historic Preservation Officer, we had to build that program through several cycles because program building is always a team effort. It takes commitment and support throughout the chain of command for it to take root and be effective. But we built a program there that got commendations from our peers and the external reviewers at the Park Service. I was proud of having left it in much better shape when I left than when I came there. The same at Fort Campbell. I served for 10 years as a subject matter expert contractor at Fort Campbell. And Fort Campbell straddles the state line, so we had to consult with 2 state historic preservation offices at the same time. While I was there, we managed to get a programmatic agreement that both of those offices agreed with that regularized the general operations of Fort Campbell with preservation. We also managed to set up a relational database and use the geographic information system as an internal application that really sped up and made more accurate both the inventory control of the different kinds of historic properties we knew of and the areas that had been searched for those properties and the consulting parties that were interested in them. We did much the same at Army Garrison, Hawaii. The Cultural Resources Program there is a very complicated and complex one, even within the rest of the Army programs. But what we did manage over my time there was a program that was recognized both here in Hawaii and by Army and other external reviewers as having achieved a level of excellence that was notable. I might mention that I was asked to serve on a discussion panel during the DoD-sponsored Native Hawaiian Cultural Communications class that the DoD sponsors. And I was also asked by higher Army level command to serve on 2 committees to draft guidance for all Army cultural resource management programs. And that request was because my knowledge and expertise were recognized by my professional peers. So I think I can be a very valuable member of the commission and help the Department of Planning and Permitting develop better capabilities and more efficient reviews. I think I can be a very good team member on that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for agreeing to talk story with me. I was able to speak with 5 of the 9 members who I do not know, and Mr. Davis was one of them. Of course, know Maheilani Seifer, Hailama Farden, Mehanahain, and Kehau Abad. Members, do you have any questions before I go into my questions for Mr. Davis? Mr. Davis, as I have mentioned to you, 3 people have submitted testimony opposing your appointment. All 3 are professionals who have described they have worked with you and have had kuleana at the State Historic Preservation Division, the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, and the Research Corporation of the University of Hawaii, working under a cooperative agreement with the U.S. Army. Their concerns are serious and include allegations that you have been argumentative with other staff and would argue to the point of hindering progress on significant projects. You have demonstrated a disrespectful attitude towards the history and culture of Hawaii and often made derogatory statements about Native Hawaiians. Your animosity created a constant hostile environment. You were dismissive of their profession as an architectural historian, as a non-DoD civilian employee, and as a Native Hawaiian. And you have ridiculed state historic preservation laws. I would also note, however, that the Dean of the School of Architecture, who is also on the Hawaii Historic Places Review Board, submitted supportive testimony, sharing he thought you were unbiased, reliable, and an expert on historic preservation laws. Finally, in doing some of our own research, we did speak to a Native Hawaiian scientist that has worked closely with you, and they found you to be effective and considerate and a well-trained archaeologist. Would you be able to respond to some of the concerns that have been raised?
Yes, thank you, Council Member. I have read the testimony recommending against my nomination's approval, and I have to say I really do not recognize myself in the descriptions given there, nor do I think the majority of the staff who have worked with me at Army Garrison Hawaii, both directly in the Cultural Resources Program and in associated environmental programs, would recognize the workplaces described in those comments either. I note that in addition to the recommendations by Dr. Chapman, there are several other comments that have been submitted that describe the workplace as much more productive and congenial than those 3 comments do. Since they were submitted by individuals who were within a work unit that I directed for much of that time, I feel like I'm constrained from trying to rebut with examples because, you know, the workplace personnel systems don't allow me to go into that. I still have a responsibility for keeping what is essentially confidential personnel matters confidential, even though I'm retired from the Army. The best I can recommend is look to the comments of other people who have had experience with me on that. With respect to the issue raised about my respect for Native Hawaiian culture, I have found that in our efforts while I was there at Army Garrison to expand the number of consulting parties that we regularly communicated with, and in the consultations and on-site visits that we had, I was very, very impressed by the many Native Hawaiians that spoke to us with passion of their sense of kuleana that their ohana had for this particular area, and we listened sensitively to their concerns. And I believe most of the Native Hawaiian consulting parties that deal with Army Garrison Hawaii would at least say that they got a fair listen and understanding of concerns, even though the Army has to deal with Army policy and competing visions from consulting parties in many cases. I believe we dealt fairly. Are there other issues you would want me to address?
Yeah, yes. My second question is, do you acknowledge and respect the state constitutional provisions and federal laws that protect Native Hawaiian interests?
Yes, council member, I do.
And in particular, maybe to make it easier for you, because you have experience with the federal level, the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, and of course the National Historic Preservation Act, are so important to our communities. And I was in Washington, D.C. when we modified those laws to be inclusive of Native Hawaiians, and I care deeply about strengthening the relationship between the federal government and Native Hawaiians, and I'm pretty sure during your tenure that you had to deal with these laws. Could you just expand a little bit upon that?
Yes. The array of federal laws that a federal agency like the Army has to address includes the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, Archaeological Resources Protection Act, the Executive Order establishing sacred sites, and the Historic Preservation Act, all of which overlap in very complex, and the definitions from one law to the other can create a really confusing pastiche. It takes a lot of work to stay on top of that. In addition to those, the state of Hawaii law uses very similar phrases like the definition for historic property that are, the words are the same, but the definitions are strategically very different from what's in the federal law. This is true for the burial laws of the state of Hawaii versus the Native American Graves Protection Repatriation Act, particularly in respect to the lineal descendancy. So while I was at Garrison, Hawaii, there were numerous consultations on burial sites, burial discoveries that we took through the process with the inclusion of the consulting parties that had identified themselves to us as having interests in human remains in particular areas under Army jurisdiction. We had the directions from higher levels of Army command, including all the way to DC, on several of those consultations, and with the active participation of OHA and the State Historic Preservation Division as the arrangements and agreements were worked out and put into written form. So it was complex work, but the rewards at the end of doing it was, again, seeing the emotional response and satisfaction of the consulting parties at having reached a conclusion that they believed was respectful of their ancestors and was satisfying to the degree possible in the situation.
Thank you so much for your thoughtful answers. Members, any other questions? Chair Waters.
Thank you so much, Chair. I'm just looking over your resume that you submitted to the committee and job-related training. One of the things that we're hoping this commission does is identify these historic archaeological important sites. The idea really is to identify them early enough so that when people want to build, right, developers want to build their houses or whatever, that there's a list of these sites that are already on record with DPP so that people can access them, DPP can access them, so that when they're contemplating giving out a permit, DPP knows, well, there's important sites here, identified sites. And same thing with the public, that they know these sites exist. Not necessarily to go visit, but so that, say, a landowner knows there's an important site on their property and they have notice of that, and they know not to build or not to bulldoze or anything like that because we want to preserve them. So what experience do you have in identifying these important sites? Because I noticed in your training, one of the things was Native Hawaiian Cultural Communications course. You took a course by the Department of Defense training in effective communications with Native Hawaiian organizations and cultural practitioners. I mean, I'm sort of troubled that you even had to take a course to learn that. You know what I mean? I mean, hopefully it was helpful, but I would like to think that something like that would just come naturally to someone that we're appointing to this commission.
Thank you, Council Chair. There's two things I think to respond there, and I'll address the Native Hawaiian Communications course first. The Department of Defense sponsors those courses both for Native American cultural communications, Native Hawaiian cultural communications on a recurring basis. And a lot of times their target audience really is the new officer in charge at the military installation, be it Navy, Air Force, Marines, or Army. They have a special shortened session of that course specifically for the garrison commander level officers. It's a 2-day course. It is usually put on in conjunction with the Office of Hawaiian Affairs and faculty from the University of Hawaii, specifically to make the class members much more aware of the array of cultural communication issues, the history of Hawaii and Native American United States government relations, legal bases. And it's attended by not just DoD personnel, but personnel from many of the organizations that do archaeological research or architectural research as well. So it's a good thing to introduce the ideas to the new officers in charge at the military installations and do refreshers for the staff that support those officers. So I think the Department of Defense feels that those classes are money well spent. The second thing that you asked about was
before we go on to the second thing, let's just wrap up this course. You know, I don't disagree with you that it's a good idea to expose these military personnel who oftentimes aren't from here, if not all the time, who come here. But it's a communication course. I mean, but what you're kind of hinting at is that it's more than just how to communicate with Hawaiian practitioners. But are you teaching these military officers who, like for the Navy, right? They're coming in, we're dealing with the Navy all the time with Red Hill, PFAS chemicals that are seeping into our water source, right? It's not just communicating with them, it's telling these military officers how important our cultural resources are, how important our water is, right? Like teaching them that. Did you do that in your 10 years working for the Army? Teaching them and impressing upon these people that this resource is so precious that you have to do everything you possibly can to preserve it. You know what I'm saying? Did you do that when you worked with the Army?
Yes, on many occasions I had to converse with senior officers up the chain of command and explain the importance of historic properties, cultural resources, and the cultural values attributed to which the Army has a legal obligation to take note of and respond and protect.
Did you fight for these archaeological sites? Did you fight for them when they were possibly going to be ruined, desecrated, bulldozed, and
to the best of my ability and consistent with my responsibilities as an Army civilian employee, yes, I did.
Well, let's talk about that. Your work experience, you started with I guess as an archaeologist, sorry, having a hard time pronouncing that word, for 3 years, it looks like, with the Army garrison. And then from 2014 to 2021, you're the supervisor and cultural resource manager. Over those 10 years, how many sites have you identified on military property that were important archaeological sites?
I would have a hard time estimating the exact number, but the activity of searching areas for historic properties, archaeological sites, or other kinds of culturally important sites was carried on every year. More acres were searched every year and reports compiled. So it was an active part of the program.
So you say these properties were searched. Did your office do the searching? What does that mean, search? You actually
Well, in terms of archaeological sites, it would be an archaeological survey designed according to professional standards. In terms of standing architecture, there would be visual inspections by people with architectural credentials. And in terms of cultural sites, there would be seeking out information from individuals with knowledge of and family connections to those areas to see what information they were willing to share. So different kinds of cultural resources required different methods of search.
Sure. Were you able to preserve these sites? I mean, before the military would do live trading with ammunition and whatnot, were you able to preserve them and say, hey, no, don't do this?
The Army did take active measures to preserve sites, including designating them as off limits for training in many cases.
Okay. I mean, the main question really is, as I explained earlier, that we want to be able to identify these sites and then preserve them forever. Because many of them are already gone, right? So I would need to know that you're going to be able to work with your counterparts collaboratively, and it's going to be a lot of work. I can tell you guys, all of you, just because it hasn't really been done.
Let's not
Right?
scare them.
No, I mean, I want to scare them because I want you to work hard, right? This is not a mail-in kind of a job that I'm asking you guys to do, right? And you work with I was going to say this for later, but you can work with the students at the university who are out there identifying sites, and then share them with SHPE, right? I'm hoping that they adopt what you guys come up with. You know what I'm saying? Like, so everybody knows. But anyway, okay,
Thank you, Chair Waters. And both myself and my Chief of Staff strongly support the DoD communications and training courses. As you know, at the state level, we have our own training course, and the individual on my left here, my Chief of Staff, was the individual responsible for pushing the Office of Hawaiian Affairs to push the legislature to get it done. And I highly recommend, I've been to several of them, I highly recommend that all of the council members consider attending one of the courses, as well as all of the directors and leadership of the city and county of Honolulu, because I think we would be all better off if we better understand Native Hawaiian rights under both state and federal law. Members, any other questions? I also wanted to welcome committee member Okimoto. Councilmember Cordero.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, Mr. Davis. Thank you for being here and also meeting with me last week, and along with the other members. I also want to follow up because I mentioned to all the members and yourself as well the different backgrounds that all of you have, and I did mention that as historic of a commission that this is, that there's so much that that everyone can learn and unlearn and relearn from each other too, right? So with that, I know that you sort of mentioned it, but if there are moments of either conflict or the inability to allow yourself to be in a conversation or make a decision, will you have the ability to recuse yourself from such decisions?
Council member, yes. And I noted on the information that I submitted to Mayor Blangiardi that should the Preservation Commission be called on to review the environmental impact statements or the cultural impact assessments for the Army's proposed retention of access to training lands on state leased lands, I would need to recuse myself from any of those discussions because as an Army civilian, I had to work on some of the preparatory work for that. So I'm aware of the conflict of interest and need to recuse if there is such.
Thank you. And later on, Chair, may I call on admin later because I noticed that there's a lot of bulk appointees that we've seen throughout this year and this administration.
Yes, they haven't presented yet.
Okay.
So I was just giving every member
sorry.
the
Okay, my
opportunity during the presentation. Are you?
I'm Pal. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember, does anybody else have any questions? We're gonna move on to, I believe, our last nominee. I just want to confirm Mehana Hine, Thomas Dye, and Kehal Abad are not in the audio. I'm sorry. So, Mr. Dye, welcome.
Thank you to Chair and committee members. My name is Tom Dye. In a few sentences, why I'm here. I'm going to read one sentence from Chapter 60, the state's historic preservation law, in the section on the Declaration of Intent. And it says that the legislature declares that it is in the public interest to engage in a comprehensive program of historic preservation at all levels of government to promote the use and conservation of such property for the education, inspiration, pleasure, and enrichment of its citizens. In my 50 years of experience with historic preservation here in Hawaii, I've learned that that works best when the community is involved. And so when I read in the paper that the city and county is going to stand this commission after a long time not standing it, and I read some inspirational words by Mahealani Cipher here, I decided, well, I'm going to get out of retirement and help the city do this if I can. And so that's why I'm here.
Good job. But tell us a little bit about you personally.
Graduated Kailua High School, 1970, class
Yay.
of 70. Went to the University of Hawaii, then went to the mainland and got a PhD at Yale University. Came back here, I worked for 6 years at the State Historic Preservation Division. I'm not really good in a big bureaucracy, but I'm confident in my ability to work collaboratively. Set out on my own to establish a consultancy. I ran that for almost 18 years before I retired about 4 years ago.
Thank you. Members, any questions? If not, thank you so much. We are going to move on to our last nominee, Mr. Glenn Mason.
Okay. Hi, I'm Glenn Mason. I'm actually a fellow Kailua High School grad, but I'm not.
Okay, another yay.
I've been in the preservation business since the Iolani Palace was originally restored. So I'm starting to feel a little bit like an artifact myself. So I have a lot of experience doing this. The one thing that I sort of reflect on is the fact that the council has established a fairly broad responsibility for this commission. And one of the things that I think is really important, because I was at one point chairman of the Historic Places Review Board in the early 80s. The characteristic of that board was that it was multidisciplinary. And I think this group, this commission, is established in the same, with the same idea. And I think that's very important. Our firm deals with the built environment. We've been doing preservation work for, well, since I've been in the business. And we have 5 architectural historians that work for us full time. But we are very clear, we are not archaeologists. We do not do traditional cultural properties. There are other people who have that kind of expertise. That kind of expertise is on this commission. And so it's very important for us to, deal with each other and talk with each other and come up with common ground for what we're doing. I have no clue how we're going to end up. We're going to have to do this communally. And I think that is both the wisdom of setting up the commission the way it is set up. And I can tell you that from my experience with this Historic Places Review Board, that, well, first of all, I felt like I learned a hell of a lot. But secondly, it proved to be the optimal way to get things done. This is a commission that is long overdue, and I'm hoping that through, my contributions and the contributions of everybody else on the commission, that we're going to arrive at something that is not going to make things harder to get permits and harder to get things through. We want to expedite things. And I think we can do that as a group. And frankly, the commission is the first step toward doing that.
Thank you so much. Members, any questions? Chair Waters.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for your willingness to serve. What exactly did the Historic Places Review Board do?
Well, its task is actually is fairly narrowly defined. That group is supposed to determine whether that group has actually the power to determine whether a property is put on the state register. It can recommend that it go on the national register. And it takes, usually what happens from that point is that the Historic Preservation Division will then take that nomination and take it to the National Register. And the keeper of the National Register will review, make comments, and sometimes there are changes that are required in order to get it on the National Register.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. And it makes sense in looking at I guess this is your resume that you provided. Key project examples, the Advertiser building, presumably the one right down the street. The
Yes.
Hilo Federal building, Building 97 from Ford Island, historic structures in Guam. But it seems like the focus there was really identifying historic buildings rather than historic Native Hawaiian sites.
Oh, we're not
that
archaeologists. We make it very clear we are not archaeologists.
Okay.
And one of the things that we very typically do when a developer comes to us or anybody that comes to us is we will say, have you hired an archaeologist? Because it's, we are not going to put ourselves in the position of making decisions like that. It would be frankly, it would be unethical.
Well, you're talking about the Historic Places Review Board, of course, but now if we're asking you now on this commission to identify Native Hawaiian historic sites.
No.
Right? I mean,
I'm not an archaeologist.
Yeah.
And I am not going to make a statement about what I think is a Native Hawaiian site. I am not going to do it.
How do you propose then that your commission, if appointed, would come to that conclusion if you're saying you're not going to do it?
I'm not going to do it.
Your commission,
wait.
that's what we're asking your commission to do.
No, It's one of the things.
One
that
of the
you're-
things.
It's one of the things.
Right.
Look, this
To me,
whole-
the most important thing.
well, it may be, and it may be, and I agree, frankly, that there needs to be a list developed. I mean, I can tell you that from experience on the review board, that all of them qualify. Every single one qualifies under criterion D. Even if it's been basically bulldozed, it qualifies under criterion D.
And you feel comfortable then saying that if it qualifies under criteria D, that there shouldn't be development on that site? Because what you said pretty early on, a few minutes ago actually, that you want to try to expedite the permits. And to me, I'm not sure that's really what we want you to think about, how to expedite the permits. That's not the commission's job. Maybe that's DPP's job, but not the commission's job.
No, I think that what we do, look, I've had a lot of experience with the Maui Cultural Commission giving testimony.
Okay.
This commission could add 2 months to 6 months or more to the permitting process.
Well, that's why, let me finish. That's why I said early on, if you identify these sites before the landowner even decides to build, you could save them a lot of money.
Exactly.
And take them out of even the permit line.
Absolutely.
Because if you identify it early and the landowner knows that, then you take them out of the permitting line. You don't even get to the point where DPP has to make that decision. Because ultimately, that's what I'm asking you guys to do. If you identify the sites that DPP has, and that was part of the problem, right? DPP wasn't talking to SHPD, right? They weren't talking. I tried to get both of them in here on one occasion.
Exactly.
I don't know if you're aware of that. But if you guys identify the sites early, I think it could solve a lot of problems. That's why I'm kind of focusing on the ability to identify the sites, and then I'm not sure we're actually asking you folks to advocate for them, but maybe we should add that in your description. But I'll defer to you, Chair. If you'd like to respond to anything I've said.
I will be the first to agree with you that identifying clearly, or even moderately clearly, a list of archaeological sites and tax maps that are associated with archaeological sites would really be beneficial. I mean, one of the things that I'm very conscious of is going through the permitting process. People come to us, they ask us to help them do whatever. And the worst thing of all for anybody, our firm in particular, is being blindsided by something. And nobody wants that, okay? So what I'm really saying is that I'm not going to pretend that we are qualified to make, or that I am qualified to make judgments about what should be an archaeological site or not. I do bring perspective about the permitting process. I bring perspective about historic sites in the built environment. Those are going to be part of what the commission is going to do. But I'm not going to say something is or is not an archaeological site. I mean, if I can't be clear about what my expertise is, I'm of no value to the commission. And I am not going to pretend to be something that I'm not. I can't be.
I appreciate your honesty. But one more question, though. I mean, do you believe that your fellow commissioners are qualified to make that decision?
Actually, I do. At least some of them are. I mean, look, my experience with the review board was when Richard Polinawan or Bill Kikuchi said something, I went, okay, fine. They knew what they were talking about. It behooves all of us to listen to any other commissioner who knows what they're talking about. And that's the advantage of, in my view, of the composition of this group, is that it brings that expertise in all sorts of areas. And that's the key. because, and I just don't want to be the person who pretends to be something I'm not. That's all.
No, and honestly, I mean, your resume is very impressive, and I get a good vibe from you. I think you're going to be a conscientious, hardworking person, really, and that's a lot of what we want from our commissioners. And if you promise to do that, be open-minded, listen to your other commissioners, those testifying, which I get from you,
Yeah.
and I'm good. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Chair Waters, so, you know, there are various requirements under the law that we establish for the commission, and so Mr. Dye is fulfilling a position as, Mason, as architecture. The other, just for all of the other members listed, include history, archaeology, planning, architectural history, Hawaiian culture, anthropology, ethnography, and sociology. And I have a couple of questions for DPP when they come up. So the onus is not on him for that singular issue. His expertise is architecture. So that's all I just want to make clear, that it will be the collective commission to be able to pool all of the diversity of their resources and expertise and you know, lend guidance to DPP in the city and county. Council Member Say.
I just wanted to interject that I've known Mr. Mason and others for a very long time. And yes, the Oahu Historic Preservation Commission was basically focused on architectural preservation. The architectural preservation of buildings all over the county of Oahu and the state. So his point is well taken, and I agree with you. If we had read the ordinance properly, it is a diversity of all groups that have some interest in historic preservation. I'm going to wait for my questions in regards to the director coming up, because the question I will pose at this time to make you aware is a question of, will this commission be of a regulatory commission versus one that supports each other in seeing that a particular site be preserved?
Thank you, Councilmember Say. Any other questions before we move to the administration? Thank you to all the nominees for their presentation, introducing yourselves and why you want to serve on the commission. If we could have the Director of Planning and Permitting, Don Takeuchi Apuna.
Thank you, Chair. So DPP is supportive of the CD1 that's proposed, and we are excited about the commission to help get ahead of issues rather than, you know, after the fact having to deal with some problems that we've had in the past. We're working actively with SHPD. We've reestablished that relationship since I've become acting director, and my staff will continue to work with SHPD. I have my planner, Michael Catt, who helped us do a lot of the setup of what you have before you now and the preparing the nominations, et cetera. So he's here to answer any technical questions. Also, our Deputy Corporation Counsel is here for any legal issues about the commission, and Liz Krieger is here to answer any questions about rulemaking, et cetera, on the commission.
Thank you so much. I'm going to lead off the questions, committee members. First, with regard to the ordinance requirements, it appears that there are numerous appointees that fulfill the requirement that the commission must include an expert in Native Hawaiian culture, issues, and concerns. Can you confirm that that is the case, and who clearly fits this requirement?
Yes, I believe that we have looked at the different applicants and that they qualify under the requirements of the ordinance.
Who is it?
For the, so Mahealani Cipher for the, and Thanks. Hailama Farden and Mehana Okola Hind.
And I'm assuming Kehau Abad.
Yes, sorry, Kehau Abad.
She might have a couple of hats. Okay. It also appears that there may be more than one appointee that fulfills the requirements that the commission must include an expert in archaeology. Can you confirm that as well, and who clearly fits that requirement?
Yes, I can confirm that. And it's Richard Douglas David, Thomas Dye, and Kehau Nani Abad.
Thank you. With regard to processes, can you share again what staff you have assigned to the commission, including a staff with archaeological background?
That would be Michael Catt, our planner, who does have archaeological background.
Thank you. Can you share with the members where the department is in terms of the administrative process to get the commission going?
So I think we are working with our corporation council about next steps, how administrative rules will be set up for or with the commission, how meetings will be run as far as how often and the procedures for the commission.
Thank you. And lastly, do you have thoughts on what will be the priorities for the commission as it begins its work?
My thoughts about priorities, I mean, certainly to help, again, find processes and ways to look at the different historic and cultural properties and inventories, et cetera, so that we can have that as a smooth running process prior to building permits, et cetera, so we can get ahead of issues.
Okay, thank you. Members, any questions? I'm going to start off with Councilmember Say, since he wanted to ask a question.
Director Rapuna, one thought that I have, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm happy that the Deputy Corporation Counsel is, at the national level of historic preservation, that law, federal law, has delegated the responsibilities to the state, correct? Where do we as a commission fit in at the county level? Is it just a commission that will do the research, do the investigation, the analysis, etc., and then before any applicant comes before the county for building permits, you share with them these areas are taboo. You cannot touch it. Will that be the regulatory process that you folks have in mind as far as how do you see the commission? Because the diversity is great. And I think what Chair Waters was thinking about was that he thought that the commission, Hailama, you folks are the ones that's going to go to the site to investigate it like Dr. Sinoto to distinguish that it is a historic archaeological site that should be preserved. I don't believe that's the commission's responsibility, or am I incorrect?
So I think that the commission serves as kind of an extension of what, the state and the national have in mind. I think a lot of what the commission will actually do, we will develop as part of the administrative rules. So a lot of that process needs to be determined moving forward.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Katz, you had anything to add on to what the director said?
Michael Catt, DPP staff. Yes, so the process will build off of the federal requirements. So yes, there will be some duties that the state will still be responsible for overseeing, but largely the commission will be responsible for reviewing permits and processes that the city is otherwise responsible for. Right now, those duties are being delegated towards the state because we rely on their expertise. But with this commission, we'll have our own experts to provide comments and feedback for how best to proceed.
And one final thought for me, you get the national level, state level, county level, even the universities, U of H, Chaminade, and maybe HPU. wouldn't you say that all of these agencies must have an inventory of listings already that you can start off as a basis, but it's going to be divided up from historical, cultural sites versus architectural sites, like, you know, which one that bothers Chair Waters a lot?
Yes, so there's
no.
definitely a lot of known sites out there, and so we're working with SHPD to get access to some of those records so that we can update our own systems in place so that we have those warnings in place for when a building permit comes in, and we know that there's previously were historic sites found there.
And Madam Chair, one final thought on behalf of another responsibility of the Commission for those who are here. Please come and oppose a lot of these measures that are happening at the state legislature or at the city in regards to development on our Ahupua'a. Meaning, I disagree with condominium property regimes for agricultural lands, which is a permitted use by the state. Nobody questions that kind of stuff in trying to preserve historic sites. The caves that are adjacent to the mountainside, that's all agricultural classification. And the state law allows it as condominium property regime, right? You know, and that's where I get so upset. Nobody from the state wants to come and testify here. They're afraid because of these permitted uses in their classification of ag lands, conservation lands, etc. I don't mind for the classification of rural or urban, but no way should you have these type of developments that we have nothing to say about in the preservation of these historic sites. But keep up the good work. I hope to see you for the next 25 years, sir, and you become the expert. Aloha.
Thank you, Councilmember Say. And any of you collectively or individually can, go kokua what Councilmember Say is saying, but I want your priority to be the commission first, okay? Chair Waters.
Yeah, thank you so much. The resolution is confirming the mayor's appointees to serve on the Oahu Historic Preservation Commission of the City and County of Honolulu. I understand that that's what we're here to do, but this is a Oahu Historic Preservation Commission, right? And I want to focus on preservation. Yeah, and really in deciding whether or not to vote for each and every one of you, that's really where I'm coming from. If that's where your mana'o is, that's where your heart is, and you're talking about preservation, yeah, to me that's significant. And as far as what Mr. Mesa was talking about, architecture, just as important, or maybe not just as important, but important, these are old buildings that we're talking about. We want to preserve that too. You don't want to just bulldoze it. Our architecture in Hawaii over the years is really, really fascinating. And we want to preserve those too. So those types of things you bring to the table in deciding whether or not to give a demolition permit. You're going to allow that building to be demolished. And that's the cool part about your job on this commission. You can determine what buildings should never be demolished. Even though some multinational corporation comes in, buys this building and wants to knock it down and build a 400-foot tower, you got the ability to say no. That's what the power I want to give you guys, right? Preserve these. But okay, so Don, upon a director, can I ask you a question? So what kind of staff are you going to provide to this commission? Because if we're going to ask these folks to work and do this important job, what kind of staff are you going to give to them, and how many positions do you have set aside? And are they full-time, part-time? What do you envision?
So right now, I think we do have a position that was recently provided to us to administrate and must be an archaeologist. And then I think we're also looking to have at least one clerical staff to help support. So that will help us at least as we move forward, but we will see how much more staff we will need.
Who gets to hire them? You gonna hire them, or the commission gets to interview and hire them?
I'm not sure. what the process
Yeah.
is.
May I
Yeah,
just
think-
suggest you work collaboratively
That's
with
a good
the commission?
question, Chair Waters. I believe that they're contemplating administrative rules too, so that might clarify that.
Right.
Yeah. So, I just want to point out the police commission has 8 staffers. 8. And salaries are $534,000, right? And of course, the police commission is important, and we fund that every year. But you know what? So are these guys. We need to give them the resources with staff to help them do their job as best as they can. So if I can convince the budget chair to put in 8 positions, would you support that?
8 positions?
Yeah, equal to what the police commission gets. And if we're saying that the police commission is as important as this commission, and do you agree that this commission is just as important as the police commission, or the fire commission for that matter,
Yeah.
which we do fund?
Yes, I think it's a very important commission.
Yeah, so I'll advocate for as many positions as I can with the budget chair who's sitting to my left. But, I think if we're taking this seriously, can I just give them 1 + 1 staff, right? And hopefully it is full-time, but we'll go fight for more for them. But thank you. And then let them help hire these people, because they got to work with them too, right?
Great. Thank
Yeah,
you.
awesome. Thank you, Director. Thank you, Chair.
Members, any other questions? Director, I just want to make sure with regard to the administrative rules that you're contemplating, its completion or consideration would not impede the establishment of the commission.
No, I don't think so.
Okay, thank you so much. Before we go into consideration, can I call Maheilani Cipher up to the podium?
Aloha.
Aloha. Ms. Cipher, I've known you a long time, and you have been there at the outset when the original law was first established, and you've been fighting all of these years. And you have heard some of the concerns raised today with regard to one of the nominees. We are going to have our own discussion, but prior to us having our discussion, I'd like to ask you your mana'o on the concerns raised, as well as the positive comments made about Mr. Davis.
It is my
Do you believe,
mana'o.
I'm sorry, before you answer, and do you believe that if he's confirmed, would you be able to work with him?
Okay, at this point, I don't really know the nominee, but in my mana'o, all of us appointed to this commission have a history of our own and knowledge of our own. And we're going to all learn from each other and teach each other. I think that Mr. Davis's history and experience will be invaluable to the commission, because we need to know all these different roadblocks and ways to make the commission stronger or help the city do its job in terms of historic preservation. No one person knows it all. We all need to learn, and we all need to help each other and help the city and our communities.
Members, do you have any further questions of Ms. Cipher? Councilmember Say.
Madam Chair, I may have a conflict since I know her for over 40 years. No conflict, right?
No conflict.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms.
I've
Cipher.
known the speaker since he was a House member and waiting tables. Thank you.
Was he a good waiter?
He was excellent in everything he's ever done.
Okay, thank you so much. Members, we are in discussion. I think we have 2 options. One, to pass all of the nominees today, and the other, of course, is to postpone the consideration of Mr. Davis and vote on him separately at a future hearing. I would like your mana'o before I make my recommendations. Councilmember Say.
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam Chair. At first, I was very, very tentative about Mr. Davis because I did get correspondence also. But listening to what Ms. Cipher just stated for the record, with his background in dealing with the military, it would be a tremendous asset to the commission in overcoming barriers that the commission, may see in the future. But more importantly, also finding solutions around the problems that we're going to be facing with the federal government, primarily the Department of Defense. Thank you.
Members, any other comments? Chair Waters.
Now that you have quorum, am I still a designated voter?
No.
No.
You were temporary, and committee member Okimoto has since come on board, so we have quorum. And actually, Councilmember Cordero.
May I still weigh in on this?
Yes,
issue?
you may offer your manao.
I would say we vote today. Let's get the ball rolling as quick as possible. You know, part of my questioning is just to kind of impress upon each and every one of you how important this job is. I don't mean to give any of you a hard time because I respect you all very much. And based on what Mr. Davis said about, I mean, he's conscientious. He's going to do his best and work with the others. I recognize the testimony from others who said that he won't work well with them, but I think we've all impressed upon him how important this is, and I would be favorable for all of them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any, Councilmember Cordero.
Thank you. I apologize, I didn't get to mention this when the administration was before us, but this also brings to light the how appointees are being brought to the council. You know, I keep mentioning this week about how I was used to seeing things like each person per resolution so that it doesn't sometimes affect moving forward the rest of the appointees. And maybe it's a conversation I have to have with the administration themselves, but this is a good example as to having the ability to have different resolutions per appointee, and we can take it up all at once, but I think, once again, this is a good example for that. I did talk to all the appointees about what I mentioned earlier about learning from each other, as well as working together, and of what they're tasked for on this commission. And with that, not only are we going to be holding them accountable, but those who are stakeholders for historic preservation will hold the commission members accountable, but also the commission members themselves. They want to do what's right. So I know that if there's anything besides the learning from each other aspect, it's also holding them each other accountable too. So I entrust them to do that as well. So I support voting on it today and look forward to passing it out. Hopefully, passing it out. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Okimoto.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members of the committee, especially Chair Waters for sitting in while to hold quorum. I came in through part of the discussion, but I appreciate all of you being here. And I think the one thing I was really impressed with at the end was Ms. Mahealani Cipher, who stated it pretty eloquently that you guys are all coming with your differences, but I hope and I look forward to you working together. I was really enjoying the discussion brought by our committee chair, Kia Aina, as well as Chair Waters and the members of the committee, because they really stress the importance of what your responsibilities are, and they're not light. And I really feel that you have an opportunity right now to help us and our city in what we can do to support the Department of Planning and Permitting, because we have a lot to get done. And so I look forward to what you guys can accomplish. And I think if it gets to the point where there's so many differences that you guys all bring, look for the strengths that you have, as Mahealani's mentioned, and hopefully you can capitalize on that versus what could divide you, because we do have a lot of work to get done. So thank you for being here. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to make my couple of comments first about the nomination of Mr. Davis and then make my recommendation. First, let me just say that given the comments on both sides, I am not going to judge someone based on both of their comments because, as Ms. Cipher said, it's good to have diversity on our and on the commission, but I also don't want to judge him based on the critical comments as well, because I don't know the circumstances under which those comments were made. I will say that my parents, and I'm sure all of our parents, have that same value about respect for individuals based on their personal and professional experiences, and so I have to respect him for that. I talked to him. I, of course, have a background in Guam, and he played a big role in their historic preservation laws there as well as here. Second, I have over 20 years of federal experience and working with individuals like Mr. Davis, and including in my capacity here at the city and county level. And I will say that there are times when I have had disagreements, and because of working with people and learning from each other, I consider them, some of these individuals, good friends. And we laugh about the times where we used to beef about issues that are very passionate to me. And lastly, we have 5 out of the 9 commissioners here who are Native Hawaiians. And many, I add, especially we have some Mana Wahine who are on this commission. And I just feel that, as Ms. Cipher had said, they all have their experiences and they're going to be able to hold their own. So with that, the chair recommends that Resolution 23-45 be amended to the posted CD1. Any discussion, any objections, reservations? Hearing none.
Last comments before you all actually vote. No, I just wanted to thank you all for your willingness to serve, and thank the mayor and his staff for being so thoughtful in selecting you all. Respect each and every one of you, and appreciate the fact that you folks are willing to serve. You know, it's pretty clear what your duties are within the resolution that we both worked on, the entire council really. But at some point, if you believe that we should amend that, what your duties are, let us know. I mean, don't be proactive about this, because we really do want to work with you folks. And I also understand that it's really SHPD, right? The State Historic Preservation Division that can designate these pieces of property that should be preserved. But that doesn't mean that you folks can't recommend to them, right? And that's kind of what I was getting at, that if you can identify these places and let SHPD know, your voice is gonna be heard, right? The other thing I just want to point out, and why this is so important, not just to work with DPP, but work with, say, the Department of Land Management, right? What's happening when people are trying to preserve parcels of land, the Department of Land Management is requiring the community to come up with an archaeological survey, and it costs $10,000. And oftentimes these are kupuna from the community. They don't have the money to do it. But if your commission designates it as a historic site that should be preserved, that'll go a long way so that the community doesn't have to spend the money, that they can simply point TLM to what your commission said. You know what I mean? Save money for everybody. But anyway, thank you very much, and I'm presuming you're going to sail through, so congratulations.
Thank you, Chair Waters. And of course, we'll have a last hurrah for the final hearing before the full council. The chair recommends that Resolution 23-45 be amended to the posted CD1. Any discussion, any objections, reservations? Hearing none, Resolution 23-45 is amended to a CD1. Chair then recommends that Resolution 23-45 CD1 be reported out for adoption. Any discussion, any objections, reservations? Hearing none, so ordered. There being no further business, this meeting is adjourned.